All right, we're looking at Judges chapter 7 tonight, and we've been discussing Gideon, and we'll continue to discuss Gideon. And this is the familiar story of Gideon, probably as familiar or maybe even more so than the fleece and the wet and the dry ground that we went through last week. This is going to be the battle against the Midianites. So, beginning in verse 1. Early in the morning, Gideon and all his men camped at the spring at Harod. The camp of Midian was north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into your hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her." It is very rare that you'll hear any kind of commander say he's got too many men. Okay? Too few men is a reality, but too many. Now you have a lot that aren't going to do anything, but you still kind of like to have them around. And so God, being the leader of this army through Gideon, says, "We have a problem. We got way too many folks here." Now, first of all, we'll notice that Gideon got up early and took his men and secured the high ground, which is typically the good battle strategy of the day. So that part had gone according to the war manual. But now we have too many. Why do we have too many? Well, we have too many because if they win with this many, they're going to take credit for it. And God says, I'm not going to share credit with anybody. We're going to fix this where the only way they can win is to give me, God, credit for what I did in leading them into this battle. And he's going to do quite a few things here that will definitely keep his presence known to the military men. But there are at least three things that this shows Israel. One is that God doesn't need Israel. God can win regardless, which is still true today. God doesn't need us in the sense of winning or losing. He needs us because he wants us to love and respect him and glorify him through serving him. To that extent, we're needed. To the extent that we're to carry the gospel to the whole world, we're needed. But we're only needed for that because God arranged for us to be needed for that, because he could have done that many other ways, and some might even been probably more effective than the way he chose to do it, but he chose to do it the way he chose to do it. I always wondered what would happen if he'd left it up to the angels and let them deliver the message. But that wasn't what he said. He said, I want my children to deliver the message. So that's the way it works. Number two, it was possibly, or at least it would result in shaming those people who had chosen not to participate, and thus they did not conquer the land as they were told to do. The Midianites would not have been a problem here had the Israelites conquered the land the way God said for them to conquer the land when they entered it. His request was, his command was, I want you to go in and I want you to take the land and I want you to take everybody out. I want men, women, children, animals, everything eliminated. But the Israelites decided on their own that that was more than was necessary. So rather than execute God's plan, they left people in the land to serve the Israelites. They were in basic servitude to them, but still, they were there. And number three, if there was any question about how powerful Israel was on their own, God wanted to make sure that didn't surface again for quite a while. So he's going to arrange a world where you either give God the credit for what's going on or you are an absolute fool. So that's probably why he did what he did. All right. Now, the verse in Judges chapter in verse 3, it says, "Announce now to the people, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." So 22,000 men left while 10,000 remained. All right. It's not usual, it's not normal for you to ask your army, say, is anybody scared? That's not usually a question that gets asked. And it's not usually a question they won't brought up because they already know the answer. There are a lot of people who are afraid to go into battle just before the battle. Okay? The year is 1960. There is a song released on the pop chart, a novelty song, which every time I read this in Judges, I'm reminded of a novelty song, which you're going to remember. Larry Verne, you probably don't remember that, simply because he only had one novelty song, and this is it. But he should have made some pretty good money off of it. The title of the record or the song is Mr. Custer. See, I knew most of you would remember it. What do you hear from the rear of the army? Why am I here? Please, Mr. Custer, I want to go home. And then you follow through the battle and you hear the arrows flying through the air. And all this time he's pleading to please let me go home. Now, see, if God had been in charge of Custer's army, he had got to go home. Because he obviously didn't want to be there in the first place. And he certainly didn't want to be there as the battle progressed. So, but unfortunately, God wasn't in charge of that particular military maneuver, and Custer and company had to meet their fate. But anyway, 22,000 go home. Now, there was only 32,000 to begin with. So that's a whole bunch of folks leaving. Makes you wonder why the 10,000 stayed. See, that's another question I always have is, what made them brave enough or courageous enough or whatever to be willing to go through with this and stay, especially when they see 2/3 of the army leaving. And now there's even fewer of them to have to fight. Okay, so you'd think that would be enough. Let's go with 10. That's God, you would make your point if you send 2/3 of the army home. And God says, no, you don't understand these people. They're pretty stupid. People in general, that is. And you have to hit them in the head with a 2x4 to get their attention. So let's see what he does next. But the Lord said to Gideon, there are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will sift them for you there. If I say, this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say, this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the river. There the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongues like a dog from those who kneel down to drink. 300 men lapped with their hands to their mouths. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, with the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites in your hand. Let all the other men go, each to his own place. So Gideon sent the rest of the Israelites to their tents, but kept the 300 who took over the provisions and trumpets of the others. Now the camp of Midian lay below him in the valley. All right. You have two different types of men who drink two different ways. A question always comes out. See, I always have these weird thoughts. Was there's only two ways to drink water? I mean, you're either going to get it on your hands and knees and lap it up, or you're going to get it. There's no other possibilities. You'd think somebody would have had a third choice out there and mess this whole thing up, but they didn't, and so it works out. And of course, God knows before it ever happens what's going to happen. There's no chance or risk here of it not working the way God intended for it to work. But it's just always odd to me because I would think, what about the guy that lays down on his stomach and drinks the water? I mean, I've seen him do that in the Western. Haven't you seen him do that in the Western? Yeah. But nobody did that. It was one or the other. Speaking of water, we divert for a moment. How many of you remember watching, I don't care whether you watch movies, TV, it doesn't matter, your various Westerns back in the 50s and 60s when they were on all the time on TV, and most of them in the theater. And do you remember when there'd be the guy on the desert that was just shot and the bad guys had done him in, and be it Roy Rogers, the Lone Ranger, John Wayne, doesn't matter. They would find him there. They would get down from their horse. They'd go over, make sure he was still alive, which he usually was. And what was the next thing they would do? Get the canteen and give him a drink of water. Now, it's only 112 out there, okay? He would drink the water and know if he was supposed to, he would be revived and come back to fight another day. Question. How hot was the water in the canteen? Can you imagine riding around with a metal container of water in 100-degree weather and then say, here, have a good sip of this? And it would burn every part of your body, I would think. Also, there would be that pool water. Same thing. That water's hot too. There is no cold water in the desert that I can account for. So I always want to see that's the way my mind works. Why didn't they cook the guy's innards when they poured the boiling water down? So no wonder he got better. I mean, it woke him right up. Okay, that has nothing to do with Gideon whatsoever. That was just a minor side note there for those of you who enjoyed the Westerns of days of yore. All right, so we have this method of dividing the people again, the men, of lapping up with their hand, holding the water in their hands, and those that lap the water up like a dog. And the case has been made. I remember, now it's interesting because this is something I remember as a kid. But it's not in Scripture. See, I really didn't realize that it wasn't in Scripture. I was told as a kid, I don't remember quite well. I mean, I don't know who all told me this, how many times I studied this, or somebody went through it. But almost every time, if not every time, the point was made that when you have your head down drinking the water like a dog, you're not alert. And if you have the water in your hand, you're sitting or you can keep watch over what's going on. And you are alert and you know what's coming. Y'all ever been told that?
Oh, yeah.
Where does it say that? It doesn't say that. It just says God made this, God divided them because of this idea, but it doesn't say that he divided them because part of them were more alert than the rest of them. Perhaps he just chose to do it arbitrarily, and this is the way it turned out. I mean, the alertness is there if you want to make the case. There's nothing wrong with saying it. Just know that it's not actually in Scripture that God said, I'm dividing them for this reason. He divided them because of the way they drank the water. So that's just a minor point. All right. Now, I don't know for sure how many Midianites are down there, but there's only 300 now. So the odds of winning on your own are pretty remote because they're fixing to take on a massive army that was known for, killing and raping and butchering and devouring the country as they took it. Remember, this was part of that locust group that just took everything in its path. So I'm sure by now Gideon's beginning to sound a little bit like the guy with Custer. He's beginning to wonder why he's here too, because although he's going to lead this army, he doesn't have much army to lead anymore. But this is what God said, so this is what we're going to do. Well, God is aware, and for obvious reasons, would have to be aware that Gideon is a person who is very cautious. Okay? Gideon doesn't just jump out and agree to do things. He has to have proof. We did the fleece, you remember the fleece thing, and we had to do it twice. And Gideon is still kind of shaky about all this. So, verse 9 says, during that night, the Lord said to Gideon, get up and go down against the camp, because I'm going to give it into your hands. If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack the camp. So he and Purah, the servant, went down to the outposts of the camp. The Midianites and the Amalekites and all the other eastern peoples were settled in the valley, thick as locusts. There's our locust reference again. Thick as locusts, their camels could no more be counted than the sand of the seashore. That's a lot of camels. I mean, that's a herd, boy, a big herd of camels. Gideon arrived just as the man was telling a friend his dream. I had a dream, he said. A round loaf of bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. The friend responded, this can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. When Gideon heard the dream and the interpretation, he worshiped God. He returned to the camp of the Israelites and called out, get up, the Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands. All right. Now, there's a lot of interesting things here, I think. First of all, God makes a discussion take place that Gideon gets to listen to. And so he sends him he goes to the right place. I mean, the whole camp's not having this dream. It's just one guy. But it works out, providentially, of course, that Gideon goes to that particular tent and overhears this dream. Most of the time in Scripture, God has a special person who can interpret dreams. Of course, the one that comes to mind is Joseph. What I always found interesting about Joseph was when the king asked his wise men to interpret the dream. And they said, yes, sir, we'll be glad to do it. What's the dream? He said, I thought you were the wise people. So they've got to come up with the dream and the interpretation of the dream. But Joseph does that, okay? Now here, God gives that ability to a non-Israelite who can, I assumed he was kind of the psychiatrist of the group that interpreted dreams. I don't know, but anyway, he gives him this dream. Now, what does he say? Does he say our army is going to be defeated? Well, yes, he does say that, but he knows who's going to defeat them. This fellow Gideon. Now, I don't know how Gideon's name would have been that well known by the Midianites, the Israelites perhaps, and certainly the tribe in which Gideon family he was in. But for a foreign army to even know or care, but this guy is he doesn't miss the mark at all. He knows exactly who's in charge of the army that's going to overthrow the Midianites, which I think is rather remarkable. Now, Gideon suddenly takes courage. Well, yeah. When the army you're going against is all but ready to give up because they already know what's going to happen, that would not only encourage you, that would make you ready to go. I would think. I bet the guy on the Custer wished he had a guy that could go in and heard the Indians dream about how they were going to surround them and kill them all. And they might have backed off the idea and not been so eager to go in and have that particular battle. All right.
Wonder why the Midianites didn't leave.
Do what?
Wonder why the Midianites didn't leave if they knew they were fixing.
Yeah, well, of course they might. They were right at this point. We only got one guy, who's heard the dream, and he's not going to really have much time to alert the rest of the forces because things are going to quickly move now into a victory for the Israelites. But I would bet, given a few days' notice, he might have talked to me into leaving. Maybe not. I don't know whether you've been able to or not. God doesn't allow for that to happen. All right. So we're ready to go now. Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies. Now, Custer did that, by the way. Just to bring this into perspective, that's what Custer did too. Worked a lot better for Gideon than it did Custer. But then, of course, Gideon was working with God, and Custer obviously was not. Okay, so he divided into 3 companies. He placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them and torches inside. Excuse me? What happened to the weapons? I mean, now these guys are wondering, why am I here? We don't have a weapon. There's no weapon here. And the little bit of weapon that a fire might be, you just put it inside a pitcher. I can't even get to it. I mean, this may not work. But Gideon says, don't worry, watch me, he told him. Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I did. Okay. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp, blow yours and shout for the Lord and for Gideon. Gideon and the 300 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. Now, the logic here, to some degree, is that when there's a changing of the guard, and this is militarily true, when the guard changes, there is confusion. Not a lot. I mean, it's a routine. People know what they're supposed to do, and they do it. But it still is a bit more of change than going while they're sitting there with their all their armor ready to go. They're in the midst of, and they just changed the guard, and so they blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The three companies blew their trumpets and smashed their jars, grasping the torches in their left hand and holding them in their right hand. The trumpets they were to blow. They shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. See, you don't need a weapon if your enemy will kill himself. Now, of course, that doesn't always work. That's not always a good battle strategy, but it certainly was a good one here. Because what God does, he causes confusion amongst them. It's dark, they're hearing noise, they're scared, they're panicked, and they begin to kill anything in front of them, which just happens to be the rest of the military army that's down, the rest of the camp. So this, as I say, this is sort of your strange arrangement when it comes to military strategy. And if you were to pull this off, you would be, even the Indians knew they couldn't do that with Custer. I mean, they had to actually go down and fight Custer. They couldn't just wait till Custer bumped all of his men off for them. So this is where God shows them that there's no way they can take credit for any of this. What did they do? Nothing other than blow a trumpet, break a pot, and shine a light. And normally, I'm sorry, but an army like, or a group of people, they weren't all military, but most of them were. But the Midianites wouldn't just go, "Oh, my panic, let's go." No, they would have gone, "What in the world is going on? But until I see an arrow come through or a spear or something, I'm not leaving." But that's not what they did. They went into overall panic. Wonder why? Well, because God said they're going to panic. Now, look at all we're not very far into Judges, but we've already seen where God has intervened directly into the lives of the enemy of Israel. Remember when we have those iron chariots that are going to be so wonderful until they bog down in the mud, and the noise that happened and the panic that God has a way of using panic on his enemies. Don't you assume, wouldn't it be logical to assume that panic reigned in hell when Jesus rose from the dead? I mean, Satan has the perfect plan. He has the perfect people. They're ready to do what Satan wants done. And lo and behold, they do it. They do it on cue. They do it on time. It couldn't have worked any better until Sunday morning. And what looked like the absolute unadulterated victory for Satan turned out to be his worst defeat. Turned out to be the defeat that would forever ruin Satan. Had he never killed Jesus, see, if he had known what was going to happen, I'm convinced, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but I'm convinced Satan would have never had Jesus crucified. And Jesus would still be walking on the earth today, waiting to be crucified, if Satan had known what was coming. But God didn't reveal that part of the plan, and God set the plan up as humans set up plans. The humans all got together and figured out how to kill Jesus. It took them a total of about 33 years, but the last 3 were more involved than the first 30. But nonetheless, they've been plotting this for such a long period of time of exactly how they're going to kill Jesus. And they finally, as they say in the world, the stars were aligned correctly and everything fell into place. And Satan was down there going, man, it's working. We're gonna take him out. It took me a while to get all these people organized, but I did. They are, and here goes. And sure enough, they killed him. And Satan rejoiced, no doubt. He had won. God was finally defeated. He's been battling God since creation. And finally, he's won. And human beings, mankind will have no way to get around Satan now. Because they're going to sin, and God's going to reject them, and Satan's going to have them. And then Sunday morning comes. You can almost imagine, and this is imagining. I'm not claiming any of this to be biblical. It's not. But you can almost imagine Satan pushing against the rock, trying to keep it from rolling open. Keep it closed if you possibly can, because that's defeat if that stone rolls away and anything comes out. You can almost imagine. I don't know that he was there. I'm not saying he was. Please don't quote me as saying or thinking that. But it just paints an interesting picture of watching Satan fighting against the inevitable of the resurrection. And whether he realized it in time to even have that thought or not, I have no idea. What I do know is the stone rolled away. And Jesus came out of the tomb alive and ready to finish the mission of salvation for mankind. When did he finish his mission? I've asked this question in here before, but we're going to do it again. When did Jesus finish the mission? At the resurrection? No, at the crucifixion. When he said it's finished. The only reason there's a resurrection is for our benefit. God's plan was carried out and finished at the cross. He had the perfect sacrifice whose blood could then serve to save mankind right then. So he could have let him die on the cross and taken him off and God could have taken him off the cross and he could have gone directly to heaven. And God's plan would have been fulfilled. All the requirements would have been met. So why was he buried? Of course, to fulfill prophecy, I know all those things. But what was the significance? The significance was if God had taken him off the cross, there would always been a doubt on what happened to him. Was he really dead? Where'd he go? All these issues, all these questions. So God said, okay, I'm going to leave him in the tomb for 3 days, and I'm going to bring him out of the tomb, and people are going to see him after he's come out of the tomb who saw him go into the tomb. There will be no doubt of his resurrection. Oh, of course, there's going to be people who doubt it, sure. But honestly, sincerely, there's proof he was resurrected. Now, why do we need to know that? Well, because we need to know that a perfect sacrifice was offered. And that perfect sacrifice now sits with God in heaven as his son and is on our side as we become part of the body of Christ. When we're baptized into Christ, we get on the right side of the equation. We leave the wrong side of the equation and come in on the right side of the equation. We go from the lost people with sin to the saved people who are without sin. We go from being the enemy of God to being the friend of God through baptism. Now, all we have to do, and I'm not trying to minimize this because I know that it's a challenge every day, but all we have to do is remain faithful. God's done the work. The work's finished. The easy part should be, it's not, but it should be, telling people what they need to do to avoid hell. You'd think that'd be a lead pipe cinch, that everybody would want to know what to do to avoid hell. But Satan doesn't work that way. Satan will twist things so that people don't even recognize hell. They don't expect hell. They don't think there is a hell. And Satan goes, good. That's what I was hoping for. Because if you don't believe in hell, if you don't believe in an afterlife, and you believe that, as many do, that there is no God, or that God is a different God to the one spoken of in the Bible, then you will be forever lost, and because of choosing the wrong thing. So here we see a salvation of God's people, with God pulling all the strings and doing all the work, and they have nothing to brag about. All they can do is just rejoice in what's happened. And what do you want to bet? What do you want to bet the odds would be of those 300 going back and telling anybody what happened? You think they kept it a secret? You think they went, I'm not going to go. No, this is unbelievable. But I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. I heard the trumpets. I saw the people killing each other. I saw us standing around the camp doing nothing except blowing trumpets and yelling and things like that. But no military action on our part. I would think they would go back and tell people that. And I would think God expects us to go tell how he saves men today, the same way he saved the Israelites from the Midianites. All right. Now, to finish up here, though, they're killing each other, and the army fled to Beth Shittah toward Zerah, as far as the border of Abel, Meribah, near Tabbath. Israelites from Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh were called out, and they pursued the Midianites. Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, saying, come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan ahead of them, as far as Beth-bahar. So all the men of Ephraim were called out, and they took the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-bahar. They also captured two of the Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zoab. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was by the Jordan. So this is the cleanup action. The battle's won. The battle's over. We're in cleanup mode now. That's where we are today. The war's over. The battle's over. God won. What does he want us to do? Well, he doesn't want us to go out and kill two guys with a sword, but he does want us to continue the fight and winning souls for him. Do we have anything to worry about? Did these people have anything to worry about? No. Why? Because they're running away. They're chasing them away. They're not coming toward them. They're going away from them. Satan goes away from us today. When we attack, when we use scripture, the sword of the Spirit to attack, we are pursuing Satan's, we're moving into Satan's territory constantly and rescuing people with the gospel. That's our job. That was the job that was given to these people here, and they fulfilled the mission. Now, we're not able to bring anybody's head back, which most of you are probably glad about that. You're probably not into beheading people that often, but it was important that these two leaders of the Midianites were beheaded, and it was important that they saw they were beheaded. But what does beheading the leader of the countries do? It assures the other people that what? They've been defeated. The last people to go down are the leaders or the kings or whatever. And so when you bring back the two heads of these two guys, you're saying, in effect, God's won, it's over, we're victorious. Now, we're not going to bring back the head of Satan. It'd be nice if we could, but that's not in the battle plan for us. What is in the battle plan for us is we're bringing people back from sin, out of darkness into light through the gospel. We're on a rescue mission. We still have to contend with Satan, but it's much like these people here. The wounds are too great. Satan can't win. He can fight back. Let me give you a quick illustration. This is historically a while back, but there was a time when we used to win wars, when we got involved with them. And the last war we won, we took out a country, and it didn't take long. In fact, it actually didn't take long enough. We did it so quickly, people forgot it happened. But under George H. Bush, we took out a country and the leadership. And it took about 2 weeks, if I remember correctly, something like that. Very short time, because they couldn't stand up against the American military power. But as they were leaving that country, or being chased in that country and being defeated, what did they do? What did they do while they were going? While they knew the war was over, I mean, they had no chance. They found out real quick they couldn't stand up to American firepower. But what did they do? They set the oil fields on fire. If we can't have them, nobody's getting them. Okay? That's Satan. I'm not saying those men were Satan. I'm saying Satan does the same thing today. He knows he's beat. He knows it's over. He knows he can't win. He knows his eternity is going to be spent in hell, in fire. He knows all that. But he's the kind of individual who says, I may be dead, I may be dying, but I'm going to take as many people with me as I possibly can. So what do? we're trying to keep people from following him because we know where he's going and we know where the people who follow him are going. And we're doing everything in our power to resist the temptation of joining him, which on a good day, when you're thinking clearly, there's no reason to join Satan. I mean, it's a stupid idea until temptation comes. And then it becomes a little easier to think about it, consider it, especially if your day's not going well or things are not turning out well or you've had some negative situation and there's the thought of, well, is God really in charge? If he's in charge, why is this happening to me? And that's when Satan says, good. If I can just keep you thinking that way long enough, I'll win you over. So our job is to teach and preach and mature people to understand that no matter what happens, no matter what it looks like, God's still in charge. Satan's under God's control. And Satan can't do anything without God's permission. And God's not going to give Satan permission to do anything that we can't withstand. So we know we can do it. The temptation is to decide maybe not. But again, the battle's over. The enemy's running the other way. And all we got to do is chase them. Catch as many as you can, bring them back to Christ. Appreciate your time. We'll look at chapter 8 next week.